If I told you that one single dinner, just one, could expose a betrayal so deep it destroys a 12-year marriage, would you believe me? Because the night I sat across from my husband at that business table, I heard the words that shattered my entire world and rebuilt me into someone stronger than I ever imagined. Before we go deeper, take a breath with me. If you're here listening to this story, it means you understand pain, strength, and the quiet courage it takes to keep going. So do something small, for me and for yourself. Hit subscribe so you don't miss any part of this journey. Tap like, not just for the story, but for every person who's ever felt unseen or unappreciated. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And one more thing. Pause for a moment, look around you, and ask yourself, what time is it right now? Because whatever time it is, this moment belongs to you. All right, come with me. Let's begin the story. My name is Lena Hartley, and for 12 years, I believed my marriage was stable. Maybe not magical, maybe not thrilling, but steady. We had routines, responsibilities, a house that looked perfect in pictures, and a life that seemed fine from the outside. And like so many people do, I convinced myself that was enough. My husband, Marcus Hartley, was a senior project director at a major tech firm in San Jose. Important, polished, respected by people who barely knew him. I worked in marketing, small company, decent pay, and work I genuinely enjoyed. We had our yearly vacations, our polished dinner parties, and our clean, predictable life. But something in that life had already cracked. Ever since Marcus got promoted 3 years ago, he'd changed. Not in dramatic ways, no shouting, no big fights, but in slow, slicing shifts. He became busier, more self-important. He lived from meeting to meeting, email to email. Our conversations shrank to short exchanges. Can you handle this? Don't forget that. I don't have time. He wasn't cruel. He simply stopped seeing me. I kept telling myself it was normal. People get comfortable. Marriage becomes routine. He's tired. But the truth was quieter and sharper. I was fading out of my own marriage. Then one night, something tiny changed everything. It was past midnight. Marcus slept beside me, breathing heavily while clutching his phone like it was part of his body. I was scrolling when a small ad appeared. Learn Japanese, free first lesson. Japanese, a language I'd studied in college, a dream I dropped when life became busy, predictable, and safe. I clicked the lesson, just to see, just for fun. The characters came back, the sounds came back, and something inside me woke up. Soon, I was studying every night, secretly. Marcus had a habit of minimizing my interests, always with that small smirk that made my stomach tighten. I once told him I wanted a photography class. He said, "Lena, you take pictures on your phone. What would you need a class for? Besides, where's the time?" It wasn't meant to hurt, but it did. So this time, when I rediscovered Japanese, I kept it to myself. It was mine, something he couldn't belittle. Months passed, and I became fluent enough to follow conversations, watch movies, understand real people speaking. For the first time in years, I felt like a whole person again, someone with potential, curiosity, ambition. Then came the night that shifted everything. Marcus walked into the kitchen, loosening his tie with unusual excitement. "Lena," he said, pacing back and forth, "we're close to landing a huge partnership with a Japanese firm. Their CEO arrives next week. I need you at the dinner." I blinked, surprised. "You need me there?" He waved a hand, dismissing the question. "Of course, it's cultural. Family stability matters. You just need to smile, look elegant, and avoid interrupting the business talk. I'll handle the Japanese." He straightened himself proudly. "I'm basically fluent now. It's one of the reasons I'm being considered for VP." He never thought to ask me if I understood anything. He never imagined I could know more than he assumed. I smiled. Of course, Marcus. But inside me, something cold clicked into place. Not fear, not anger, something sharper. Opportunity. Because he didn't know that I spoke Japanese. He didn't know I would understand every single word that left his mouth that night. He didn't know that the mask he wore so confidently would crack right in front of me. And I had no idea yet that the truth I would hear at that dinner would become the fuse that blew my marriage wide open and freed me forever. The week leading up to that dinner felt like moving through fog, slow, heavy, and filled with thoughts I couldn't quite grab. Part of me wanted to believe Marcus was still the man I married. Another part, the part that had been quietly hurting for years, already knew something was wrong. I spent my evenings reviewing business Japanese terms, listening to polite speech patterns, and preparing myself to understand everything Marcus didn't want me to hear. I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe nothing dramatic, maybe just normal business talk. But a small whisper inside me said, "Pay attention. This matters." The day of the dinner arrived. Marcus fussed over his appearance more than usual, straightening his tie, adjusting his sleeves, checking his reflection in his phone camera. "You look fine," I said softly. He barely glanced at me. "I have to make the right impression, Lena. This deal could change everything for us. Just don't stress about anything. I'll handle the important parts." The important parts. He always assumed I played no role in those. I wore the dress he picked, a navy conservative piece that made me feel like a supporting character in someone else's success story. On the drive into San Francisco, he practiced sentences in Japanese under his breath, glancing at me only when he needed reassurance. "You'll be quiet during the business parts, right?" "Yes, Marcus. And try not to overthink, just smile." "I know," I said. He didn't notice the small, bitter smile that curved at the edge of my mouth. Hashiri was the kind of restaurant that whispered money, soft lighting, polished stone, quiet elegance. The air smelled like cedar and precision. The Japanese CEO, Mr. Takahiro Mori, was already waiting at the table. Mid-50s, silver-framed glasses, sharp eyes that missed nothing. He stood when he saw us, polite and warm. Marcus bowed too deeply, too eagerly. I followed with a natural, soft bow that came from my studies, not desperation. Mr. Mori addressed us in English at first, but it was clear he preferred Japanese. Marcus switched languages quickly, proud of his fluency. At first, the conversation was harmless. Company projections, market plans, cultural etiquette. I sipped water quietly, nodding whenever their eyes passed me over. Then Mr. Mori looked at me with a gentle smile and asked in Japanese, "What field of work are you in, Mrs. Hartley?" A simple, polite question. Before I could even pretend not to understand, Marcus jumped in. "Oh, she works at a small marketing company," he answered in Japanese, waving his hand like my career was a child's hobby. "Nothing serious, keeps her busy. Mostly she manages the house." I kept my expression still, but inside something twisted painfully. A hobby? 15 years of work, reduced to something to keep me busy? Mr. Mori tilted his head just slightly, the smallest flicker of discomfort, but he didn't correct Marcus. The next moment was worse. Marcus leaned closer to Mr. Mori, lowering his voice like he was sharing some male bonding confession. "To be honest," he said in Japanese, "Lena doesn't really understand business. She's content with a simple life. I handle all the important decisions, financial, professional, everything. It works well because she doesn't get in the way." My heart pounded so hard I thought the table might shake. But years of being quiet, polite, agreeable kept my face from revealing anything. It only got darker. Mr. Mori asked about stress, balance, and how Marcus handled pressure at work. Marcus laughed, a low, arrogant laugh I had never heard before. "I have my outlets," he said. "There's someone at work. Her name's Julia. She's in finance. We've been seeing each other for 6 months now." The room didn't move, but the world tilted. Marcus kept talking like he was discussing weather. She gets me. She understands ambition. She'll go far, much further than Lena ever could. Honestly, she's been good for me. Lena never really had the capacity to keep up. I felt my stomach drop. The air left my lungs. My fingers curled around the water glass so tightly I thought it might crack. Mr. Morey's face stiffened, discomfort unmistakable now. He tried changing the subject, but Marcus continued, boasting about offshore accounts he had created for career flexibility, accounts he had moved money into without my knowledge. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. I just listened. He had been preparing for a future without me, slowly moving money out of our joint savings, planning a life with another woman, calling me simple, calling me decorative. After 12 years. Dinner eventually ended, mercifully. Mr. Morey bowed to me at the exit, his voice gentle. "It was very nice meeting you, Mrs. Hartley. I wish you strength." Strength, not happiness. That told me everything. Marcus hummed the whole ride home, pleased with himself. "That went well," he said casually. "I think I really impressed him." I stared out the window, watching the city lights blur. I felt hollow and burning at the same time. When we got home, Marcus kissed my cheek absently and disappeared into his office. I walked upstairs, closed the bedroom door, and stood in silence until my phone buzzed with a thought I hadn't allowed in years. I needed help. I needed someone who wasn't Marcus. I needed someone who saw me. I scrolled to a name I hadn't called in years, Emma Carter, my college roommate, my once best friend, now a family law attorney. I pressed call. "Lena?" she answered, surprised. "It's almost midnight. Is everything okay?" My voice cracked. "No," I whispered. "I need a lawyer." Emma didn't speak for a moment. I could almost hear her sitting up, shifting her posture from old friend catching up to attorney preparing for war. "Lena," she said softly, "tell me what happened." And I did. For the first time in 12 years, I told someone everything. I told her about the dinner, every word Marcus had said in Japanese, how he dismissed my career, how he boasted about cheating, how he talked about hiding money in offshore accounts, how he was preparing for a future where I didn't exist except as a situation to handle. By the time I finished, my voice was trembling, my hands were shaking. Emma inhaled slowly. "Okay," she said, calm but firm. "First thing, breathe. Can you breathe for me?" I did. Barely. "Second," she continued, "nothing he said is normal. And what he's doing with those accounts, that's not just unethical, that's illegal. He's hiding marital assets. That's financial fraud, Lena." The room felt smaller. The air felt heavier. Even though I already knew something was wrong, hearing someone else say it, someone professional, made the truth hit harder. "I don't have proof," I whispered. "Just what he said." "That's enough to start," she replied. "But we're going to get proof, and I need you to listen very carefully." I sat down on the edge of my bed, clutching the phone like a lifeline. "Do not confront Marcus," she said. "Don't mention the dinner. Don't hint that you understood. Don't change your behavior. If he's hiding money, he will panic and move fast if he senses you know." I don't know if I can pretend around him." "You can," Jenna said gently. "You already have. For years." The truth of that hit me like a punch. I had been pretending for so long I barely remembered what honesty felt like. "Tomorrow morning," she continued, "you're going to start gathering everything you can access without raising suspicion. Bank statements, tax returns, emails, investment documents, anything that proves financial movement." "I don't know where he keeps everything." "You'll find it," she said. "He's arrogant. Arrogant men get sloppy." A bitter, pained sound escaped me, halfway between a laugh and a sob. She wasn't wrong. "Once you get the documents," she said, "send them to me. Don't keep copies at home. Don't leave traces. And Lena." "Yes?" "You're going to get out of this. You're not powerless. You're smarter than he ever realized." Something inside me cracked open, a tiny, fragile piece of myself I'd buried years ago. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay." We talked until nearly 2 a.m. Emma walked me through legal steps, emotional steps, safety steps. She reminded me who I used to be, someone capable, someone bright, someone with a spine before life dulled it down. When we finally hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. Everything Marcus said at that dinner replayed in my mind, but something had shifted. The pain wasn't swallowing me anymore. It was sharpening me. The next morning, I told Marcus I wasn't feeling well and would work from home. He barely looked up from his laptop. "Yeah, sure, whatever. I'm running late." As soon as his car pulled out of the driveway, the air in the house changed. I felt alone, but powerfully alone. For the first time in years, the house wasn't suffocating me. It felt like a battlefield I finally had permission to step onto. I went straight to his home office. Marcus kept everything neatly labeled, not because he was organized, but because he believed he'd never need to hide anything. After all, why hide anything from a wife he believed was too simple to understand? I opened the filing cabinet. Bank statements, tax returns, investment portfolios, transaction logs. My heart slammed in my chest. There it was. 2 accounts I had never seen before, opened under his name only. Regular transfers. $5,000, $8,500, $12,000, month after month. Over $50,000 quietly moved over 8 months to a bank in the Cayman Islands. My jaw tightened. My fingers trembled. I took photos of everything, uploading them to the secure cloud folder Emma created for me. But then came the moment that made my stomach twist in a way I'll never forget. A small folder labeled Personal, Private. I knew I shouldn't open it. I opened it anyway. Printed emails, some financial, some logistical. And then emails from Julia. Paragraphs about missing him, plans for secret weekends, jokes about once you're done dealing with Lena, lines about the life we'll build once she's out of the picture. But one sentence made my blood go cold. The Lena situation. I wasn't a wife to him. I wasn't a partner. I was an obstacle. My heart broke in a clean, final way. A break that wouldn't be repaired. I took photos of everything, sent it all to Emma. For 6 weeks, I lived beside Marcus with a quietness that felt like armor. I cooked dinner, I asked about his day, I smiled when he spoke. But behind my calm expression, I was preparing for war. Emma built the case, piece by piece, document by document, and on a Thursday afternoon, we filed for divorce. The next morning, Marcus's HR department would receive evidence of his financial misconduct. Not only was his marriage ending, his career was about to crumble. I arrived at Emma's office early that morning. I didn't go to work. I told them I needed personal leave. At exactly 9:30 a.m., the papers were served to Marcus at his office. At 9:31 a.m., his company received the evidence packet. I sat in Emma's conference room, hands shaking, coffee untouched, staring at the clock like it held my fate. At 11 a.m., Emma walked in with her phone in hand. "It's done," she said. "Everything is in motion." My whole body went weightless, terrified and free all at once. "What happens now?" I asked. Emma exhaled slowly. "Now, Lena, he faces the consequences." When Emma said he faces the consequences, I thought I was ready. I thought I was strong enough to handle whatever came next. I wasn't. Not yet. Because when you've spent 12 years wrapped in someone's orbit, even someone who slowly erased you, stepping outside of it feels like learning to breathe new air. Sharp, Strange. Cold. That first day after the papers were served, my phone lit up over and over. Call, call, call. Voicemail after voicemail. 47 missed calls by evening. I didn't listen to any of them. Emma did. She documented everything. The messages ranged from confused to angry, then suddenly tender, then furious again. I didn't want to hear his voice, not even for a second, not after knowing what he'd planned for me, not after hearing how he talked about me behind my back in a language he assumed I didn't understand. So I stayed at Emma's house. She had a quiet guest room with soft sheets and warm lighting, warmth I hadn't felt in months. That night, I lay awake listening to the unfamiliar silence. It was peaceful, painful, freeing. The next morning, Emma walked in with a cup of tea. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "I feel like I detonated a bomb," I whispered. "You didn't," she said gently. "He did. You just stopped pretending you didn't see the fire." I closed my eyes and nodded. Later that afternoon, with Emma beside me and a police officer nearby, just as a precaution, I went back to the house to pick up my things. Marcus was there. The moment I walked through the door, I barely recognized him. His hair was messy, his shirt wrinkled, his face pale and puffy from either sleeplessness or panic, or both. "Lena," he breathed, stepping forward. His voice cracked like someone barely holding on to sanity. What, what are you doing? Why would you do this?" I didn't answer immediately. I had spent 6 weeks preparing for this moment, practicing my composure, rehearsing my emotional armor. I kept my voice steady. "You know why." He swallowed hard. I don't understand. You're scaring me. We were fine." "Fine?" My voice sharpened. "Is that what you call it?" He stepped closer, desperation rising in his eyes. "Lena, please, sit with me. Talk to me. We can fix this. I'll stop seeing Julia. I'll—" "Stop." My voice sliced through the room. He froze. "You're not sorry for what you did," I said slowly. "You're sorry you got caught. That's not— You told your boss you needed to leave early yesterday, but they already contacted Emma. They already opened an investigation. You're suspended, Marcus. They know about the offshore accounts." His face went white. It was the truth hitting him, not my words. He knew exactly what that meant for his career. "You were going to leave me," I said quietly. "You were preparing financially. You were planning a future with another woman. You told her once you were done with the Lena situation, you could stop hiding." He looked shattered, like someone had slammed the air out of him. You understood," he whispered. "During the dinner, you understood?" I met his eyes. "I've been fluent for a year." Marcus staggered back like I'd struck him. "You lied to me." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the irony was almost too absurd to believe. "You lied," I repeated softly, "about knowing a language. You lied about who you were." He sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. "I'm losing everything," he whispered. "My job, my reputation. You? You lost me the moment you treated me like I was disposable." Silence stretched across the room. Heavy, final. I moved past him, heading upstairs to pack my clothes, shoes, personal items, the pieces of myself I still owned. Marcus didn't follow. He just sat there, broken, confused, angry, lost, a swirling hurricane of emotions he created himself. I felt no satisfaction in seeing him that way, no joy, no revenge-fueled thrill, just closure. Cold, clean closure. When I finished packing, I came downstairs with my bags. The police officer stayed at the door. Emma stood beside me, calm and protective. Marcus lifted his head, his voice barely a whisper. "Lena, please, don't go." I looked at him, really looked, and realized something painful and true. I had already left the moment I found the first offshore account. You made your choices, and now I'm making mine. He stood, reaching out like a drowning man grabbing for a lifeline. "Just give me a chance. I'll change. I'll be better. You had 12 years. My chance was gone long before today. And without another word, I walked out. I didn't look back. Not once. The divorce process began officially that afternoon. It took months, long, exhausting, emotionally draining months, but with every document filed, every hearing attended, every truth exposed, I felt myself returning, piece by piece, breath by breath, strength by strength. Emma fought like a warrior. The offshore accounts, the hidden properties, the printed emails, it all came to light. Marcus lost his job, his reputation, his carefully constructed image. Everything he built at my expense crumbled before his eyes. And for the first time in 12 years, the consequences were his, not mine. The process was far from over, but for the first time, I could see the path ahead, and it didn't belong to Marcus. It belonged to me. The months that followed were a strange mix of exhaustion and awakening. I had expected chaos, I had expected fear, I had expected guilt even. Guilt for breaking a home, guilt for destroying the image of the marriage I'd convinced myself was good enough. But what I didn't expect was the quiet. A deep, steady quietness that came from no longer living with someone who minimized me, ignored me, or spoke to me only when it benefited him. A quietness that slowly, gently made room for something I hadn't felt in years, my own voice. I stayed at Emma's house during the early weeks of the divorce. She refused to let me book a hotel. "You're not going through this alone," she said, and she meant it. Every morning she'd appear in the doorway with coffee and a soft grounding. "You awake? We've got things to do today." Attorney Emma and friend Emma were two versions of the same woman, but the friend version reminded me of who I used to be. The girl who laughed too loudly in college halls, the girl who dreamed about traveling, the girl Marcus slowly erased without ever raising his voice. We spent hours preparing evidence for the case. The more we uncovered, the more horrified I became. The offshore accounts were just the beginning. Marcus had purchased 2 small investment properties, both in his name only. He had moved bonuses, commissions, and stock payouts into separate accounts I had never seen before. He had filed emails with accountants about future restructuring, meaning restructuring his life without me. Every document cut deeper than the last, but every document also sharpened my resolve. Emma looked at me over a stack of papers one afternoon. "You know," she said, "he really thought you'd never find any of this." "I know. Do you understand what that means?" I stared at her. "What?" "It means he underestimated you so completely." She tapped a finger on the table. "He made himself easy to beat." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, so I did neither. I just breathed. The legal process officially began with mediation. Marcus showed up looking like a man who hadn't slept in days. His new attorney sat beside him, expression tight and irritated, clearly aware his client was in deep trouble. When Marcus saw me, something flickered across his face. Regret? Shock? Something else? I didn't care. "Lena," he whispered, leaning forward, "can we talk? Please, just the two of us?" I kept my hands folded. "No." His voice dropped. "I don't understand how you could do this." I met his eyes, steady, unshaking. "You did this. I'm finishing it." He flinched. What followed was a slow, painful unraveling of his financial life. The mediator reviewed every statement, every transfer, every hidden account, every email he'd printed like a fool, thinking he'd lock them away forever. His attorney's frustration grew by the minute. At one point, she whispered, not quite enough, "Why didn't you tell me about the emails, Marcus?" He only shook his head, defeated. The offshore accounts alone were enough to strip him of bargaining power. The hidden assets sealed everything else. The affair? That was just the torch on top of the pile. I walked out of that room feeling lighter. Not victorious, not vengeful, just lighter. Like someone had lifted a weight that had been sitting on my chest for years. Weeks turned into months. Marcus sent a few emails, all passed to Emma. Some apologizing, others begging, others angry. I didn't respond. I learned to cook for one. I walked in the evenings. I listened to Japanese podcasts not as an escape anymore, but as a connection to something I loved. And slowly, piece by piece, the version of me that had been buried began to rise. One afternoon, about 2 months into the divorce, Emma walked into the guest room with her phone in her hand and a strange look on her face. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "What?" She handed me her phone. A LinkedIn message was open. From Takahiro Mori, the CEO, the man from the dinner, the man who had watched my marriage crack right in front of him. His message was warm, respectful, and surprisingly direct. He wrote that he'd heard, through industry channels, about the divorce, and though he didn't know the details, he wanted to offer something. His company was opening a U.S. branch. They needed someone with strong marketing experience who understood both American culture and Japanese nuance. He remembered my composure at dinner. He remembered how carefully I listened. He remembered something in my eyes, a spark he hadn't forgotten. Would I consider coming in for a conversation? For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Emma stared at me. "Lena," she whispered, "this is a senior-level role. Do you know what this means?" I did. It meant I was being seen, respected, chosen for something because of who I was, not what I provided someone else. My hands shook as I typed a reply. I agreed to meet him. When the day came, I walked into the conference room wearing a soft cream blazer and the quiet confidence of someone who'd survived hell and come back standing taller. Mr. Mori stood when I entered. He bowed. I bowed back, confidently, intentionally. And when he greeted me in flawless Japanese, his eyes lit up with something between admiration and gratitude. "I knew it," he said gently. "I knew you understood more than you let on that night." For the first time in months, I smiled genuinely. The interview was long, detailed, respectful. He asked about my experience, my goals, my strengths. He never once spoke to me like I was small. When it ended, he looked at me warmly. "Lena, you are exactly what we need." I left the building that day knowing something huge had shifted again, but this time in my favor. It wasn't revenge, it wasn't victory, it was rebirth. The day Mr. Mori offered me the position, I walked out of that glass building feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Weightless. Not because everything was perfect, far from it. The divorce was still in progress, my life was still in pieces, my heart still bruised. But something inside me had shifted. I was no longer waiting for Marcus to define my worth. I wasn't orbiting his world anymore. I was building mine. When I returned to Emma's house that afternoon, she took one look at my face and gasped. "You got it!" I nodded, unable to stop the small, trembling smile forming on my lips. She screamed, the loud, unapologetic, joyful scream only a friend who's seen you at your lowest can make. She hugged me tightly, shaking me slightly, as if to say, "See, this is who you were always meant to be." We opened a bottle of wine that evening, the expensive one she'd been saving for something big. We sat on her balcony under soft string lights, sipping slowly, breathing in a quiet future neither of us had expected, but both of us welcomed. "You understand what this means, right?" Emma said. "Tell me." "It means your life doesn't end because your marriage did." She paused. "It means you're not stepping out of a broken home, you're stepping into your power." I didn't realize I was crying until she handed me a tissue. The next weeks moved fast. My new job contract arrived. Marcus's company completed their investigation and terminated him. His offshore accounts were court-ordered to be disclosed and divided. The properties he hid became marital assets. My attorney, my friend, fought like a shield around me. Marcus tried contacting me again. Emails, texts, one long, rambling voice message in which he begged me to talk, to understand, to remember what we had. Emma listened to all of them before I could. "None of this is for you," she told me. "It's for him. He wants stability back. You were his stability." I nodded, because I finally understood something. Marcus didn't miss me. He missed the version of me he could control, the version who didn't question him, the version who didn't know Japanese, the version who didn't know the truth. That version of me no longer existed. The final mediation meeting was our last face-to-face interaction. He looked tired, older somehow. Life had hit him fast. His attorney had the worn-out look of someone dragging a client through a disaster of their own making. When I sat down at the table, Marcus stared at me like he was seeing a ghost. Maybe I was. A ghost of the wife he assumed he owned. "Lena," he said softly, "you look different." I knew what he meant. I looked awake, alive, unbroken. "I am different." He swallowed, eyes glassy. "Are you really going to take half of everything?" I blinked once. "That's what marriage means, Marcus. That's what commitment means. And that's what you risked when you hid everything." He leaned forward, desperate. "I was stressed. I made mistakes. I wasn't thinking clearly." "You were thinking clearly enough to hide money," I said quietly. "Clearly enough to cheat. Clearly enough to talk about me like I was an inconvenience." He closed his eyes, his jaw tightening. "Lena, please, can't we talk privately?" "No." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "I'm done giving you private chances to hurt me." His face collapsed. The mediator handed us the settlement breakdown. Marcus would lose a lot, financially, emotionally, socially. But every loss was the direct consequence of his choices, not mine. When the session ended, I stood up to leave. Marcus stood too. "Lena, can you at least tell me why?" His voice cracked. "Why you went this far?" I looked at him, really looked at the man I spent 12 years loving, trusting, defending. "You told another woman you'd leave me. You told her I was in the way. You told a business partner I was simple, that I didn't understand your world, that I was just decorative." My voice didn't shake, not once. "And you believed I would never hear it." A tear slipped down his cheek. I felt nothing. "Goodbye, Marcus." I walked out of the room, my spine straight, my steps steady, my heart finally my own. The divorce finalized 6 months later. I got half of everything he tried to hide, plus spousal support while I rebuilt my career into something bigger than I ever imagined. My new job was demanding, exciting, intimidating, and exhilarating all at once. Mr. Mori treated me with respect from day one. My team valued me. People listened when I spoke. People trusted my ideas. Sometimes, sitting in meetings where my voice mattered, I would feel a wave of disbelief wash over me. How had I spent years thinking I was small? One evening, after presenting a major campaign proposal, Mr. Mori pulled me aside. "You know," he said gently, "when I saw you at that dinner, I could tell something was wrong, but I also saw something else." "What?" "Strength," he said. "Quiet strength. The kind that survives storms." I didn't know what to say. I only knew that for the first time in a very long time, Someone saw me clearly. I walked out of the office that night feeling like the world was opening instead of closing. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't justice. It wasn't closure. It was transformation. And I wasn't done yet. My life after the divorce didn't transform all at once. It shifted slowly, like dawn creeping across a dark horizon, subtle at first, almost invisible, until suddenly the whole landscape looked different. I moved into a small but beautiful apartment in Redwood City. Sunlight poured through the windows every morning, touching the wooden floors and quiet corners like an apology from the universe for all the years I'd spent dimmed. For the first time in years, I decorated a home the way I wanted. Soft colors, gentle textures, shelves lined with books I loved but had boxed away because Marcus once told me they made the house look cluttered. I bought plants, 5 of them. Marcus hated plants. I named every single one. Every night after work, I cooked meals exactly how I liked them. Not bland because he preferred simple flavors, not rushed because he wanted dinner on the table at a specific time, not measured, not monitored, just mine. I sipped wine slowly, not gulped in stress. I read novels without glancing up to check if he needed something. I walked through my own space without holding my breath. It was strange how freedom felt foreign at first, like I had to learn how to enjoy my own life again. At work, things progressed faster than I expected. The team trusted me. Projects moved under my direction. Campaigns I designed performed well, some far better than anyone predicted. One afternoon, while reviewing analytics, my coworker Daniel stopped by my desk. He was a soft-spoken analyst with kind eyes and a quiet intelligence that lingered in the air like calm. "You know," he said gently, "your campaign increased engagement by 38% in 1 week. That's not normal. That's exceptional." I blinked, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "Thank you," I said. He nodded. "You're good at this. I hope you know that." I didn't, not fully, but hearing it made something warm unfurl inside me. I started going to the office cafe with colleagues, something I never used to do. I stayed after meetings when people wanted to talk instead of immediately rushing home to maintain the illusion of a perfect marriage. I laughed. I contributed. I existed. But not everything was easy. Sometimes, late at night, when the apartment was too quiet, my mind drifted back to the woman I had been, the woman who apologized before speaking, the woman who made herself small without being asked, the woman who didn't recognize the warning signs in her own marriage because she thought being ignored was simply normal. Healing wasn't linear. Some nights hurt. Some mornings were heavy. But I was not the same woman who whispered, "I need a lawyer," through tears months ago. One evening, around 10 p.m., I got an email from Marcus. I hadn't heard from him in weeks. The subject line was simple: closure. I stared at it for a long time before finally opening it. He wrote that he was working a new job, lower position, lower pay, but steady. He wrote that he regretted everything. He wrote that he was in therapy now, trying to understand how he became the man I saw that night. He wrote that Julia had left him 2 months after he lost his job. The email wasn't angry. It wasn't manipulative. It was quiet, broken, human. But the last line stayed with me. "I hope one day you can forgive me, even if we never speak again." I sat with that for a long time. Then I closed the email. Forgiveness wasn't something I could force. It wasn't something I owed him. Maybe one day, maybe never. But right now, forgiveness wasn't the goal. Living was. A few months into my new job, something unexpected happened. Mr. Morey invited me to dinner. Not a business dinner, not a team outing, a quiet one-on-one dinner at a small Japanese French fusion restaurant in downtown San Jose. I didn't know what to expect. He arrived early, bowed politely, and his eyes were warm, not inappropriately, not romantically, but respectfully, like someone who genuinely saw the person in front of him. "You seem lighter lately," he said gently over the first course. More at peace. I nodded. I think I'm finally learning who I am again. He smiled, a smile full of understanding. You know, sometimes it takes losing everything we thought we needed to finally find what we truly deserve. I didn't expect his words to hit so deeply, but they did. Dinner flowed easily, not like the stiff, cold evenings with Marcus's coworkers where I sat silently while he used my presence as a prop, not like the controlling dinners where I had to dress and behave a certain way. This was simple conversation, 2 people sharing food, 2 people sharing space, 2 people being human. At one point, he paused and looked at me thoughtfully. That night, he said, the first time we met, I saw something in your eyes. Pain, yes, but also something else. What was that? Survival. I exhaled, my heart tightening. You were waiting for the right moment, he continued softly. You found it. I didn't know how to respond, but I didn't need to. When the evening ended, he bowed and I bowed back. There was no expectation in the air, no pressure, no assumptions, just peace and possibility. Weeks passed, work flourished, my confidence grew, my life slowly built its new shape. But the biggest transformation wasn't the job, it wasn't the freedom, it wasn't the independence, it was something quieter, something internal. I learned to stand in a room without shrinking, learned to speak without apologizing, learned to trust my own instincts again. And slowly, I realized something powerful. I wasn't rebuilding the woman I used to be. I was becoming someone completely new, stronger, brighter, fearless. Time has a strange way of healing you when you're not watching. Some days feel heavy, thick with old memories. Other days feel like new beginnings, wrapped in quiet sunlight. Months passed and the pieces of my life kept shifting, settling, rebuilding in shapes I never expected. Work became a place where I didn't just contribute, I belonged. I wasn't the quiet wife at a business dinner anymore. I wasn't the shadow in someone else's life. I was leading meetings, pitching ideas, building campaigns, and mentoring younger staff who looked at me like I was someone worth learning from. The company grew quickly. The U.S. branch stabilized. And without even realizing it, I became the kind of person others relied on, the kind of person Marcus always convinced me I wasn't. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Still, healing is never a straight line. I remember one evening vividly. I was sitting on my balcony sipping tea, the soft glow of the city stretching into the distance. For the first time in years, I felt content, quietly content. Then a thought hit me, a realization I wasn't prepared for. I had survived something I didn't even know was killing me. The slow erosion of self, the quiet silencing of a voice, the gentle, polite disappearance of a woman inside her own life. Marcus never hit me, he never yelled, he never threatened. But sometimes the deepest wounds come from the smallest cuts, the ones too quiet to notice until you're bleeding. As I breathed in the cool night air, a soft knock echoed from my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, I froze. It was Marcus. He looked different, thinner, tired, a little hollow around the eyes. His hands were tucked into the pockets of his jacket like he didn't know what to do with them. "Lena," he said quietly, "please, I need a moment." My first instinct was to close the door, but something, maybe closure, maybe curiosity, made me step outside onto the hallway instead. "What do you want, Marcus?" He hesitated, shifting his weight. "I'm not here to fight. I just wanted to say something in person, just once." I crossed my arms. "I'm listening." He exhaled a shaky breath, eyes fixed on the floor before finally meeting mine. "I messed up," he whispered. "Not just the affair, not just the money. I messed up us. I messed up you." I stayed silent, letting him speak. "I convinced myself you weren't Enough, he admitted. And I don't know why. You were always smarter than me, kinder than me, more patient than anyone had a right to be. He swallowed. I wanted to feel superior, needed to, maybe, and I used you to make myself feel big. His voice cracked. And in doing that, I destroyed everything. I didn't move. Not because I was frozen, but because the words didn't affect me the way they once would have. I wasn't angry, I wasn't hurt, I wasn't tempted. I was simply done. I'm not here to win you back, he added quickly, afraid I might misunderstand. I know I can't. I needed to look at you and tell you I'm sorry. He paused. And I needed you to know that losing you was my fault, all of it. For a moment, the hallway was silent except for the hum of distant traffic. Then I finally spoke. I don't hate you, Marcus. His eyes widened a little, surprised. But I don't love you anymore, I said softly, and I never will again. He blinked, absorbing the truth. You're right, I continued. You used me to make yourself feel powerful. You talked about me like I wasn't a person. You hid your life from me and expected me to be grateful for what little attention you gave me. I breathed in slowly. I'm not angry anymore, but I'm done. Marcus nodded, his face falling, not dramatically, just quietly, the kind of acceptance when someone realizes the damage they caused can't be undone. Thank you, he said, for hearing me, even after everything. He took one step back, then another. You deserve better than what I was, and I hope you find it. When he walked away, I didn't cry, I didn't tremble, I didn't hurt. I felt free. Not because he apologized, but because nothing he said, nothing he lamented, nothing he regretted had the power to control me anymore. After he left, I closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. That night felt like the last chain falling away, the last shadow dissolving, the final breath of a chapter that was never meant to follow me into the future. Over the next months, my life blossomed quietly. Work kept evolving, and so did I. I traveled to Tokyo for the first time since the job offer, a trip that felt surreal. Walking through the neon-lit streets, speaking a language I once learned in secret, I felt like I had stepped into the life the younger version of me dreamed of but never believed she could reach. I visited temples, I ate food I once only saw in dramas. I stood on a bridge overlooking the Sumida River and felt something settle in my chest. I made it. Not because someone saved me, not because someone loved me, but because I saved myself. On the final night of the trip, Mr. Mori invited a small group of us to dinner. It wasn't business-focused, it wasn't formal, it was warm, comfortable, human. He sat beside me and said quietly, "You look at home here." "I feel at home." He smiled, not as a boss, not as a man expecting something, but as someone who respected me. "You rebuilt your life, Lena, and not everyone can do that. Many stay broken. You didn't." A soft warmth filled my chest. I realized then, this wasn't a story about betrayal, it wasn't a story about destruction, it wasn't even a story about revenge. It was a story about resurrection. And I wasn't done rising. The day I officially signed the final paperwork, the last signature, the last seal, the last quietly whispered, "It's done," from Emma, I didn't feel the thunder of closure the way movies promise you will. Instead, I felt a softness, a quiet settling, like the final piece of a long, brutal puzzle finally slid into place. It didn't feel like an ending. It felt like space where something new could grow. After the Tokyo trip, life moved forward with a rhythm I didn't expect, a calm one. No chaos, no desperation, no fear of tiptoeing around someone else's moods. Just my own breathing, my own choices, my own life. But the truth is, healing doesn't mean forgetting. And freedom doesn't mean life suddenly becomes flawless. There were nights I woke up remembering the dinner at Hashidi, the moment I realized my husband saw me as nothing more than something decorative. There were days when I second-guessed my worth, moments when I wondered if I could ever trust someone again. But each time the doubt came, something stronger answered. You survived it. And survival changes you. Work kept evolving. I was given bigger projects, more responsibility, more leadership. People trusted me, something I once thought was reserved for others, not for the quiet woman who ate dinner alone while her husband worked in his office. Occasionally, I caught myself smiling at the most ordinary things. The smell of coffee in my kitchen, the soft hum of my apartment at night, the little post-it notes I left myself with Japanese vocabulary I wanted to master, the plants I watered every morning, alive, thriving, growing, just like me. Then one Friday after work, Daniel stopped by my desk again. "You done for the week?" he asked. "Almost," I said, closing my laptop. "Want to grab something to eat? A few of us are heading to the little sake place downstairs." For a moment, I hesitated. Old habits whispered, "Marcus wouldn't approve. You should go home. Don't draw attention." But that voice wasn't mine anymore. It was a ghost, and ghosts don't get to make my decisions. I smiled. "Yeah," I said softly. "I like that." Dinner was simple. Laughs were easy. No one tried to control me. No one talked over me. No one treated me like I was small. Daniel sat across from me, his smile warm and quiet, the kind that didn't demand anything. "You seem lighter lately," he said gently. "I think I am," I admitted. "You deserve that." His words were soft, but they sank deep. I didn't expect anything from him, not romance, not closeness, not a future. But for the first time, I realized something important. I could let people in again, slowly, carefully, on my terms. A few weeks later, I got a message from Mr. Mori asking if I'd consider helping lead the upcoming expansion project. It was a chance to step into a major leadership role, one I would never have considered years ago. The Lena who sat silently at that dinner table, pretending she didn't understand what her husband thought of her, would have shrunk back. But the Lena I had become, she didn't hesitate. "Yes," I replied. "I'd be honored." That night, sitting on my balcony with the city lights flickering below, I let myself reflect on the journey. How I went from learning Japanese in secret just to feel like a person again, to using that skill to uncover the truth. How the truth shattered my world so I could rebuild a better one. How people I barely expected, Emma, Mr. Mori, even quiet, gentle Daniel, helped light the path forward. I thought about Marcus sometimes. Not with pain, not with longing, with clarity. He wasn't the monster of my story. He was the lesson, the turning point, the catalyst that pushed me into the life I was meant to have. And I realized something I wish every invisible, quiet, underestimated woman knew. Sometimes you don't break because you're weak. You break because the life you built was too small for the person you're becoming. My story didn't end with revenge. It ended with self-respect, with strength, with freedom, and maybe, in the small, quiet spaces, the beginning of something new. Years later, when people ask me how I survived the collapse of my marriage, I tell them this. I learned a language in secret, not to understand someone else, but to find my way back to myself. The night I sat at that dinner table listening to Marcus speak about me like I was disposable, that was the moment my old life died. But it was also the moment my new life began. And for the first time, I stepped into it unafraid, unapologetic, unbroken. Because sometimes the worst night of your life is the night you finally wake up.